God, I can't wait to wear this clothes. The more I'm looking at it, please every movie, I dream, I see myself.
Hey Sewmates, yes, that's what our hip padding does to our clients. It makes them happy. Not only do they look realistic, they are very comfortable. So if this is what you're interested in, kindly stay tuned to the end. I'm going to show you how to make the BBL size as seen in this tutorial, the medium-sized hip padding, and the regular size. As always, our tutorials are straightforward and they are beginner friendly. So kindly stay tuned and pay attention. Please do not skip so you don't miss anything. And if you haven't watched the skirt tutorial on how to contour the body, the lower body, kindly watch it so that this tutorial will be seamless for you. First of all, we're going to create the hip padding pattern. So from your waistline, you want to go down by 2 inches and mark, and then on the hip line, you're going to go in from the side by 5 inches, like so. So you go in from the side on the hip line by 5 inches and mark. The length of the hip padding is usually between 16 to 18 inches. It depends. If you're doing something very short, you use the 16, but ideally you're supposed to use the 18 so that it blends very well with your thighs. So from the waistline, go down by 18 inches and mark. That's the same thing we're going to do for the back, but for now we're concentrating on the front skirt pattern. So mark the 18 inches and then you're going to use your hip curve or your pattern master. Here I'm using my hip curve and I'm going to connect those 3 points. So from the 2 inches point on the side below the waistline, I'm going to connect to the hip line. That's the 5 inches point from the side, and then from there I'm going to connect to my 18 inches from the waistline at the side seam, like so. So if you look at the curve, it's not realistic, so I'm just going to go in and freehand this curve, making it a smoother, a smoother curve, making the curve look smoother rather. Yeah, so that's just basically what I'm doing here. So it's still close to the curve, but yeah, I'm just making it smoother here. If you're doing the 16 inches, you would follow the same procedure and connect it to the 16 inches point. And then for the back, you do the same thing. Go down by 2 inches on the side seam, like so, from the waistline. And then you mark the depth where the hip padding is going to stop, like we did at the front, and that's 18 inches. Now, the underbutt level is usually 4 inches below the hip line. It might be different for certain people, but this works for me. So 4 inches is what I use all the time and it works for me. So from the hip line, just go down by 4 inches and then rule a horizontal line. That's going to be your underbutt level. On the underbutt line, you should come in by either 4 inches or 4.5 inches. For this tutorial, and most times I use 4.5 because it helps me blend the curve from the zip parts at the center back better. As we go on, you would understand what I mean. So on the hip line, where the zip is supposed to be, note I haven't added the zip allowance. I'm just creating the hip padding. So you want to go in by 1 inch on the hip line from the center back, and then you're going to connect from the 2 inches to the 1 inch at the center back, and then from there you're going to connect to the underbutt and to the 18 inches at the bottom. So use your hip curve again or your pattern master, like so. Make sure you keep the curved part at the center back, the 1 inch at the center back, and then connect like so to the 18 inches point here. Again, I'm going to draw a freehand curve to create a better curve for the butt part of this hip padding. At that 18 inches point, I came in by half of an inch because I did not want it to be very sharp. It's always better this way. So I'm just going to go in with my marker and make the curves more visible. And this line that I'm drawing using my marker is where you're going to cut on. If you don't want to cut it, you can just trace it onto another pattern paper. That's if you're still going to use the skirt block. But if you're not going to use it, then just cut it out like so. Next, I want to show you how to add the hip padding allowance to your dress, to your fabric when you're cutting your skirt. So if you just put the hip padding, it's going to be too tight. So we are going to create an allowance, and on the hip line, we're going to extend it by 0.75 inches. This is for the regular size and for the medium size. So you're going to go in with your hip curve and connect it to that 2 inches point where the hip padding is going to start from. And then you're going to connect that same 0.75 inches point to the 18 inches at the bottom. Note, if you're using the BBL size, you're going to add 1 inch, not 0.75 inches, please, 1 inch. But for this, since it's the regular size, we're just adding 0.75 inches. And we're going to do the same for the back. I'm going to repeat it again. You're going to mark 0.75 inches along the hip line, and then you're going to connect that 0.75 inches to the 18 inches mark at the bottom of the hip padding level, and then also to the 2 inches point below the waistline. So I want you to take note of the fabric directly under the pattern paper. I usually use Lycra Lining for that. So I cut it to be exactly the size of the client. Of course, adding the sewing allowance. But I create 2 layers after that. So this extension where I add the hip padding allowance, I cut two fabrics. I cut it to still be the same length of the paper, and then I cut the main one, which will extend to the hem of the dress. So let me explain again. The first layer of fabric is going to be the length of the paper, which is 21 inches, and it's going to be Lycra lining. I'm going to add the allowance by the sides, but it's going to be the actual size of the client with 1 inch allowance by the side, and for the back, yes, by the zip side. Then I'm going to cut another layer that will carry this extended hip level, and then I'm going to cut another one that will extend to the bottom of the dress. For the regular size hip padding, this is what the skirt looks like without the hip pad, and this is what it looks like when the hip pad was added. So you're going to use the pattern to cut out the shapes like so, and then you're going to use arrows just to indicate which one goes with which one, so you don't trim off on the wrong side, right? So we're going to trim off the corner that we're joining. That's the part along the hip line. You're going to trim off the corner like so that it can overlap and interlock, like as seen in the tutorial by the side. So notice the way I'm trimming off the corners. Do the same for the other sides. So just along that hip line, you're just going to trim off the corners, right? But for the other parts, like the curves at the back, you're going to shave it off. So you're not just going to trim off the corners, you're going to shave it off so that it blends with your ties or your client's ties. So you're going to shave it like seen here in a slanty pattern. So do this so that the tip is flat and it blends seamlessly with the tie, so that when you put it on the body, it's not going to be puffy, it's just going to blend. The reason I do this is because I don't want the hip padding to show through the dress, so I double the layers after the base layer that carries the hip padding. I hope that makes sense. So pay attention to how I trimmed off the corners and then how I started shaving in a slanty manner. You need to be careful when you're doing this so that you do not mistakenly cut off the edges and then reduce the size of the hip padding. So just trim, shave, like so in a slanty manner. Notice how flat it is, and yeah, that's what you want to achieve. Just notice how flat it is along the edges. This procedure requires a lot of patience and concentration if you want to achieve the seamless blend with your client's ties or skin. So just take your time, make sure that you achieve a leveled slant like so. Next, you're going to join the front hip padding to the back hip padding. I prefer to do this with a thread and needle. And then kindly watch carefully how I join it. I match the tops together and then I begin to use my doubled thread. So I double my thread and I use a big needle and then I pass it like so. Be careful, watch the way I pass it. If you drag the thread backwards, it's going to tear the foam. So just take it straight through the other side and then take it backwards like so. Straight and backwards. Try not to drag your thread in a backwards direction. If not, it will cut through the foam. Take your time, pass it, and then when you get to that part where the hip padding begins to separate, that's where the curve comes in. And if you miss it, then you have missed the curve. So notice the way I raise the hip padding and join them together. Make sure that they are still side by side but raised up like this, and then you continue to join it, putting it together, passing your thread. So just hold it together. Make sure that it's lifted from the ground level and then continue to pass your thread. That's where the interlocking happens, and that's where you create the curve so that it flows with the regular human shape. And also when your client wears her clothes, it just flows with the hip curve, so that place won't be rigid, it won't be dragging for space, it will just follow the curve of the body. That's where the magic happens. Notice how they are joined together, and then just continue until you're done. If your hip padding is not this curved, then you are getting it wrong. Now, this is why it is important to trim off the corners of the edges where the two hip paddings are joined together. If you don't trim it off, you're not going to achieve this. Some people prefer to cover their hip padding with fusible interfacings before they join them together, but me, I prefer to join them, achieve the curves before I iron the fusible interfacing to it. So I usually use a paper stay or a hair stay, but for this tutorial I used a paper stay, and this is what it looks like. Next, this is the Lycra lining that was cut to be exactly the client size, and this is how I attach the hip padding. So I start pinning it from that 2 inches level below the waistline, and then I align the seam allowance with that middle part. That's the joining where the hip padding is joined together. Please, this is not the regular hip padding. This is the BBL hip padding. I just used this video because I didn't record the one for the regular hip padding, but it's still the same procedure. So you're going to smoothen the fabric on the hip pad like so, pin it round, and then you're going to take it to your sewing machine or use your hand, anyone you want to do, or used, and then stitch it down along the edges like so. And this is the result you're going to get when you're done. Next, we're going to talk about the medium size. The only difference is that we used a mixture of the fiber and a foam. The fiber can flatten upon pressure, and that's why we still maintain the 0.75 inches allowance when we're cutting it on the fabric, when we're adding the hip padding allowance on the fabric. So you're going to join the fiber to the foam using your glue gun. Notice that the fiber is 0.75 inches wider than the foam. So when you use the pattern to cut the foam, you're going to reduce the sides by 0.75 inches so that it's smaller than the fiber. And then you're going to join them together using your glue gun, and that's all. You're not going to do any trimming. The fiber is going to create a flat edge, no need to shave it, and then it's going to blend with the your client's ties. There's no need to shave in this this type. Next, the BBL size. The BBL. So there's nothing serious about the BBL. All you have to do is join two foams. So you're going to double the foam and join them together using your glue gun. So watch carefully so that you do not make a mistake, because this BBL is tricky. If you do not shave it properly, it's going to look unrealistic. So notice that I'm not applying the gum close to the edges. That's because we're still going to shave. And if you know the nature of a glue gun, it becomes very strong. So you don't want to have any issues or difficulty when you're shaving the edges. So when you apply the glue, avoid the edges. Just focus on joining them together. Next, we're going to shave. And as usual, we're starting from the joining along the side seams. So you want to trim generously along this part like so. So just watch carefully, trim it off like so. Do the same for the back, and then we're going to trim the edges. So just watch carefully and understand the difference between this and the regular hip padding and the way it is trimmed. Notice the interlocking and the overlap. So as usual, we're going to trim off the edges in a slanty manner, but because the foam is doubled, you're going to cut the inner layer very well, and then you're going to start trimming the outer layer. That's the one that is going to be on top. You're going to trim it like so, and then you're going to start shaving. And notice that I'm shaving both layers at once in a slanty manner because I want a uniform slant. So I'm trimming both the bottom and the top layer. Kindly pay attention and observe the way I shave the corners. Remember, the tip is supposed to be thin so that it will blend with your client's ties. So just continue, be careful, especially for this BBL type. You have to be careful so you don't cut off the foam. Also notice that I'm trimming off that corner so that that place doesn't struggle with the hip padding to relax. So if you don't trim it off, it's not going to relax. Notice how flat it is. If you don't achieve that, again, you are getting it wrong. So just pay attention and do it properly. Repeat the same procedure for the back. Notice that I already cut off the edge so that it would interlock and overlap properly along the hip area. And then here I'm just reducing the inner part like I did for the front, and then I will go ahead and shave again in a slanty manner. If you have watched this tutorial up to this point, I want to say a very big thank you. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe, and if you have subscribed, Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. Kindly hit the like button, share to people that you think need to see this. Leave a comment. I answer questions swiftly, so please leave a comment, your question, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Kindly turn on your notification bell so you will know when I post new videos. And again, thank you for watching.